the lights and go.
Well, I'm flattered you all show up, and I don't have very many slides to show you because most of my slides are tied up in Colorado and weren't available. But I was able to borrow a few from a friend of mine up in Cleveland called Munchar. Fortunately, he made copies of some of my pictures. But as some of you know, all my pictures are down at the Collier's collection down in Dallas, Texas. So they're part of the Republic of Texas, I guess. And but first I'll tell you about my experiences. I guess I'm about the only person in this room who remembers actually seeing the Northern Ohio Railway, as well as the Northern Ohio Tracks and Lights, of course. But the first year I went to school, we lived up near Grace Park in an apartment near the Union Station. Went to school at Bowen School, and Bowen looked out on the Columbia Valley, and immediately below my classroom was the double track line of the Northern Ohio, which ran the mile from Main Street, Akron, up to the point zero where it transferred to the Pennsylvania Railroad. Then on the beyond those two tracks was a single track, not very polished, and that was the western end of the Akron, Canton, and Youngstown. And their trains, we never saw them. They must have done their work at night. But every morning, about 9 to 10 a.m. in the morning, why one of those cold water Brooks moguls, the Northern Ohio, would work hard pushing a string of cars up to the Pennsy transfer, and the resulting cloud of smoke would darken our classroom and rattle the window panes, and the teacher would get annoyed. And that was my first experience with the Northern Ohio. On Sunday walks, my father had a little interest in the railroad. Go down Perkins Street Hill and down by the interurban terminal, which was a hub of activity. And sitting over at the Northern Ohio Freight House would be a little red caboose. And I was always intrigued by that. Some of you have heard me explain it had New York Central lines along the top, and the logo of the New York Central lines, and then the mysterious letters N period, O period, RY period, C43 or C44. And us kids in our hiking, later on we'd sell our paper routes to Beacon Journal. We'd take the little shortcut home, which was the longest way. We'd go down to the Northern Ohio tracks and hike up that the mile, taking our time, and then cross the other three railroads, Union Street, and go home. We were always intrigued. There were no trains. We never saw an AC&Y train, one of those six-wheel switchers. And up at Summit Street, the top of the grade, the first part of it, just beyond there was a little unfinished railroad yard. And this really was something to us. It had a spooky air to it because the tracks were laid. There were piles of ballast here and there. Obviously, the thing had never been used. There were bushes and trees starting to grow in the track. But what got us was the switch lights were lit. You could hold your hand on top of and feel the heat. And this caught our eye one cloudy day because those baleful red and green roundels were glaring at us, and it really brought us to a halt until we cautiously went over and what's going on. I've never yet learned why those switch lights on that never-used track were kept lit like that. Somebody on the Lake Erie and Western must have ordered that all switch lights must be lit, all switches, and the order was never rescinded. I saw a little yard that was probably the hopes of the Northern Ohio to have some business that never came. It was a streak of rust with no traffic to amount to much. Well, the AC&Y, to get the downtown Akron to make a connection with Main Street to the Northern Ohio, they had some really expensive construction. They had to bypass Akron Junction, which was a mess of B&O, Pennsylvania, yards, roundhouse, a loop, and all kinds of stuff. And through that went what used to be the Pennsylvania and Ohio Canal. And there were no canal boats at that time, though. So the AC&Y dug an enormous sand cut to bypass Akron Junction, went under Arlington Street, then under the double track Erie, and the double track of the combined Pensy and B&O. And we kids kind of enjoyed those. Those were kind of mysterious tunnels. And then the AC&Y, in order to get to Main Street, had to chisel off the face of a sandstone bluff and crowd along the canal. And finally, they had a little dinky yard at Summit Street, and the tracks straggled on down to Main Street, where they interchanged the two cars at the Northern Ohio. So that was our original experiences with those two railroads. We saw all this traffic of the other three railroads. We could sit on the wall at the Union Station and watch Saturday morning traffic of all three big railroads. But these other two were mysteries to us and attracted us. They had a peculiar attraction for us. Of course, later on, after the AC&Y took over the Northern Ohio, the AC&Y had late in the afternoon, if on time, and I gather it usually wasn't. We might be down there in that area, hiking around and hear the long station blast of the whistle when the train was out somewhere between Valley Street and Fairlawn. So we'd have plenty of time to go down to behind Bowen School and sit on the wall there and to watch the ensuing show, as we called it. It was very popular with us. We even would sit there if it was raining. That made it even better show. Well, along would come one of those ex-nickel plate 10-wheelers, the 300 series, and about 15 freight cars. And at first the AC&Y didn't have a mail express car, and they'd leased a bright red Pennsylvania Railroad car with those porthole windows, you know, some suburban run. And then that'd be tailed by the ancient open platform coach. Well, they'd spot those two cars at that little station at North Main Street, which incidentally annoyed the Akron Chamber of Commerce because people often thought that was Akron's Union Station. They were really embarrassed by it. Well, anyway, they'd uncouple from the two cars, and the engine would struggle with freight cars to clear North Main Street. And in the days of the Northern Ohio, that end of Main Street was a dead end. There wasn't any traffic, so if they blocked the street for a few minutes, who cared? There weren't many automobiles either. But in 1923, they built a viaduct. Now they had a double track interurban trolleys, streetcars, trolley freights, and all those automobiles and a few pedestrians. And they didn't much enjoy the show that we did enjoy. Well, after they unloaded all the mail and express, and it seemed to take a long time, especially on a rainy day, it would be getting wetter and wetter waiting. Finally, the 10-wheeler would back down, couple on the two passenger cars, back out to where the engine was almost on the big bridge. The big bridge hadn't yet been replaced, and there was a speed restriction there. I think it was either 6 miles an hour or 3 miles an hour. Either way, it was a crawl. So the firemen would get up a full head of steam, and finally they were ready to try for the hill up to Summit Street. Those 3 blocks were a struggle for a tonnage train. So the man would come out on the street with his stop sign, blow his whistle, hope he wouldn't get run down by a Model T Ford or a streetcar. And here come the 300 pounding with the whistle blowing, the bell rang. Oh, put on a great show. Pounding across North Main Street there and hit the grade. Well, by the time he'd got one block up there, he'd lost a lot of his momentum. By the time he got in front of us, Pine Grove School, halfway up, that little engine was really struggling. And we enjoyed it. And especially if he'd slip out and lose it and stop. Oh boy. Now the traffic did get stalled down on Main Street. So back would go the train down and they'd go through this performance a second time. And on one rainy day, they finally gave up and cut the train and doubled the hill. For some reason, they just didn't believe in doubling the hill unless it was absolutely necessary. We always regretted we missed the one day because right opposite where we sat for this show, a rail broke one day in the middle of this performance, and the 10-wheeler headed right into the canal and was digging into Perkins Street. Well, we missed that. But anyway, that's my beginning with the Northern Ohio. Well, I can think of one more thing. One of the kids took music lessons over in Valley Street. That's on the west side of Akron. Valley Street ended in a bluff, sand bluff. Down below was where the Northern Ohio had scooped out enough space for its dinky little terminal. Well, the AC&Y had moved everything out, wrenches and everything else, and they left behind a two-stall engine house with the door standing open, an Armstrong turntable, a boxcar body sitting there that had been the sand house, I guess. And so we would go down after, well, while the one brother was torturing the music teacher, while we'd go down and play with the turntable, and later he'd join us. In the sand house, we found the case for one of these standard New York Central Line's headlights of the time. This was an affair that, with the ventilator top would probably be this high. And they were originally arc electric and then had been converted to incandescent. For some reason, this case was left behind. And I don't know why, we cut it out, put it on the turntable, and wore ourselves out going around and around and around until finally we had to go home. But that was playing with the Northern Ohio Railroad, our style. And it was a sad day for us when we discovered that some old meanie had come along and scrapped the turntable. Well, anyhow, taking pictures, kids that age didn't have cameras, anyhow. I started taking pictures about 1932, and AC&Y was a good target and a frustrating one. All the trains seemed to come out of the sun, whether it was in the morning or in the afternoon, you were shooting into the sun. Then the engines were lettered, especially those in a yellow gold paint. And Verichrome film of the 1930s did pick that up. You could read it when you took the pictures, but you sure couldn't see it on your negative. And it was a big improvement when they changed over to white letters. We never could figure out, and I never had it explained, why they spread Akron, Canton, and Youngstown on their engine tenders, cabooses, the passenger cars. It was an odd kind of reverse advertising, and it was the subject of much discussion around Akron, especially the people who sat there and waited for this darn mixed train to get out of their way to see these two tail-end cars go by Akron, Canton, and Youngstown. And there was a lot of wisecracks about, well, if that's the rate they're progressing, they ain't going to get to Youngstown this week. And of course, as I've explained to many people in Akron, no, they didn't go to Canton or Youngstown. I went the other direction to Delphus, Ohio. But apparently the AC&Y management thought there was some advertising advantage in having this strange name, staring people in the face. For a while, they had a rectangular monogram in gold and red. Must have been, close to 2 feet square. And they put that on tenders and everything else. But that didn't last long. They went over to a nice white letter. Well, anyway, I guess that's enough fire to begin. Caboose 43, as I mentioned.
Can you bring that up higher?
Want it up higher? Yes. I need something about the size of the boat.
It's this right here. That's good.
How about that?
Good.
Huh? Too high?
There's an adjustment underneath that camera.
That's the projector.
I never learned until about the time I picked this picture. Had originally been built as a narrow gauge. It had several names for that narrow gauge line. And you can see there by the picture that it shows it's narrower than the other cabooses. Well, the 43 lasted to the mid-30s at least. I don't know what happened to the 44. The AC&Y didn't get much in rolling stock when they took over the Northern Ohio. They got 10 mobiles, largely worn out, 2 cabooses, 3 open platform coaches, and several non-revenue cars of some kind, and a streaker rust 150 miles long. They were very frank about what they took over. But anyway, this car has gone through, let's see, about 5 names at least by the time this sticker was taken. And of course, it wasn't much good at the tail end of the freight train. You couldn't look out the side and see anything. It was too narrow, and the below was down below a high-speed boxcar system. This is one of the 10 mobiles they got with the from the Northern Ohio. They were built in 1896 by Brook among firemen, especially as cold water Brook. They had a lot of firing problems. I used to have a newspaper clipping about 1918 or 19 where one of these pulling in the afternoon passenger train, which is really a mix, had broken down out around Medina, and second engine went out and started, and I guess it got about as far as Sheridan Center, and they had to send a third engine. The train finally arrived late that night at the Union Station in Akron, as it was called. This was one of the first series of box cabooses, second hand, as I understand. I used to know where they got this stuff from. And there's a page job where they've added that first herald that they slapped on everything. One of the carmen said, "You guys better out of it." And this is one of the homemade cabooses. They were rather proud of it. And I guess they rode pretty good. And then they always argued they were before the Milwaukee and putting in a side gauge caboose like this. Milwaukee gets the credit for building the pencil argument. And then these were later, one of them with a steel shroud product for that high. Lots of daylight between the frame and the boiler, but and then of course, just the track of the fixed train on the big bridge at Akron, and like I said, there's always problems with AC&Y pickers go out to summer, barging in on their neck. This was a typical consist. The coach was always ahead of the mail express car going west, so the best time to ride the train was to ride eastbound when you had the equivalent of observation cars. And here's the partial shot of their Jordan spreader being used in cutting. I told you about that they had to dig to avoid Akron Junction. The postal cars, they finally gave up paying rent to the Pennsylvania Railroad and bought these two secondhand. They were postal light number 10 and 11. And I think it got one paint job, and that was at the beginning, and that had to last the rest of its career. And you can see here that the fella got around to slapping the herald on the postal car. It's the only clean thing on it. There by the baggage road. Couldn't find a slide of the coaches in their original format. This is the way they rebuilt two of them. They added steel plating to the side, straightened the body. I think they put the equivalent of a steel underframe on them. This is after it was converted to maintenance away surface, give it a new number. When they came, they were numbered 15, 16, and 17. Or no, the other way around. They came as 21, 22, 23. AC&Y then rebuilt them a little and gave them a new number. That was part of the rebuilding, I guess. But I don't know what happened to these three cars. This shows you what happened in the middle of the Depression. This is on the big bridge out here at Rocky River, sometimes called River Styx. This is one day in the Depression with one of the second-hand business was pretty bad at the AC&Y office. This shows the postmarks. Train 90 would be the eastbound train, westbound train 95. And this was established in 1891 when the Pittsburgh, Akron, or Western was completed at Main Street in Akron, and the name remained unchanged until the line was discontinued in 1950. That was another example of it, train 95, that's the only difference. These probably don't mean anything to both of you, but to postal history fans, there's a lot of collecting railway postal office markings, and they are very elusive. Some in Ohio used on some of the early urban lines are among the great rarities and command a lot of scholars to find them.
Did you mail those to yourself, Bob?
What?
Did you mail those to yourself?
Yeah, just give it to the clerk and ask them to give it a clear postmark. That was probably a day I wrote it one time. I can't even read the date, February something.
February 17th, 1930?
Oh, I would come home from, I worked at Columbus for 4 years, and I'd come home weekend sometime. It was a nice day. On Saturday, I'd ride some other railroad up to, say, I'll try to think now, Continental, oh, that was it.
Greenwich?
New York Central.
Greenwich?
Or, something, get off and take the AC&Y on to Akron and walk up the hill to go home. This is an earlier postmark when it was Northern Ohio, and it carries the marking train 2 in it. The Northern Ohio was Bobbitt. Train 1 was going west, train 2 coming the other way. This shows the morning mix coming into Akron from Britain, and it shows one of the last cars they used on the mixed train. In the end there is a mixture of RPO, baggage compartment, and coach. At this time, the railroad was almost completely out of passenger carrying. they would average, according to the monthly reports, maybe $27 for a month. But when you consider that's for 60 trains going 160 miles in each direction, I'll let you divide up how many cents average per train it was. So when the Akron Railroad Club would go on New Year's, if it fell on a weekday, out to New London and back, and 11 or 12 tickets would come in and created a sensation at the AC&Y office. It was a tremendous percentage-wise increase in passenger revenue. I think the body of one of these cars is up at the Northern Ohio Trolley Museum. There's a car up there that looks like it probably was one of these two second-hand cars. The odd part of this picture is that there's a switch engine there in daytime. The track in the foreground is the original AC&Y main track that went on down to Main Street. And it looks in its typical condition, which was don't go very fast. And everything was jammed in. Car department, storekeepers, motor power, and they never seemed to have enough space. And to build up the line, the AC&Y made a pretty good class railroad out of the Northern Ohio. They bought a Jordan spreader. This was their first switch engine of the 8-wheel variety, number 35. I don't know who all those people are standing in the foreground trying to hide it. But I guess it must have been some great occasion. They eventually had 6 of these Toledos, and they came from various sources, secondhand partly. And of course, things would go wrong once in a while on the AC&Y and even the best regulated railroad. And this was out near pretty close to Fairlawn, where this particular one happened. They still were building up the track. They were putting in a lot of 90-pound rail and heavier stuff. But even so, once in a while, a rail would break or a terminal would turn off. This was their second wrecking train, and this was the wreck at Copley, caused, if I recall correctly, gravel trucks going across a nearby crossing and spilled a little bit too much gravel. When the freight came along, off for the bushes headed the 400. And freight cars went in all directions. And around this little depot, which survived without a scratch. Whoever was in there at the time was probably paralyzed with fright while all this was going on. But it was a marvel of the day that the building somehow wasn't touched. And even the diesels could have trouble staying on some of the track. That's the second wrecking train. That's 4 out of Copley. This was the first wrecking train. I don't know where it came from, but eventually it went to the Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad in Pennsylvania. And this bridge was rather isolated for many years, but nowadays it's a very busy paved highway down there. I think it's Portage Pass or Memorial Parkway. This is just out in line, the big straight, doing a little switching. The first new engines they bought were these 5 particular class of them. But you'll notice they slapped the popular logo on the tender. So this would indicate it was a fairly early picture of it. These are very powerful little engines, low drivers, specially built so that they could be operated over the 2 big bridges that had light axle loading limits on them. One at Akron and the one near here. And of course there were a lot of other light loading places too at AC&Y, very light rail. And eventually these engines were relegated to mostly service on the west end of the railroad. You didn't see them much around Akron or around Britain. They got 5 of them. Then along came the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern second-hand engines. I believe they got 6 of those. They replaced the light 10-wheeler nickel plate engines in road service. 324 was the last of that group of 5 with light two-way loaders. 322, I don't know where that is. But you notice they've gone back to using the spelled out lettering on the tender. Probably because no one could figure out what that logo was on the tender. It may have looked nice in a drawing in the office, but when it was on a boxcar going past you or a locomotive tender on North Main Street, if you were baffled, what the devil was it? The roundhouse in Britain originally had the 5 stalls to the left, and then they kept adding on as they got more things to put inside it. I was there the day they got their first diesel locomotive. I didn't take any pictures. I was standing there like every... Well, what happened was they invited a lot of people, stockholders, shippers, I guess, to come out and see the new diesel. It was a cold winter day, and all the doors were shut, and the diesel was in the stall closest to the camera here. And so I was standing in the field up above. That was a favorite place to go and see if anything new, where now all those houses are up above the site of the roundhouse. That was just a field. You could go up and see the whole railroad, what was going on. Well, anyway, I didn't know whether to go down the path and join the crowd or not, but I figured, well, I better stay up here. There's probably a lot of grass and be out of it. All of a sudden, the place erupted. Doors were being flung open, people were coming out coughing and choking, and huge clouds of greasy oil, black smoke was coming out of every place in that roundhouse, it seemed. And I had to back up in the field because a little bit of it drifted my way. And apparently they had started up the diesel, and whoever started it up must have been a locomotive fireman. In the true sense of being a fireman, and they must have turned the wrong valve or something. But anyway, the grand showing off of their first diesel didn't turn out the way it should. I waited quite a while hoping they'd eventually bring it outside, but I guess they gave up on it for the day. And I stood there, I had a camera, I should have taken pictures of it. Man, it was black smoke. Well, this is one of the Lakeshore Michigan Southern engines. This particular one, 353, was popular for use on the Hicks train. I don't know why. Maybe it performed better. And then one of them had this odd tender configuration. That was one of the second-hand ones. And eventually they start setting them aside and putting the can over the stack. Because now they had enough 400s. Eventually they had about 10, I think, of these 400s. And the 400s took over the fixed train operation. They had a connection with the belt line that variously named belt junction and all this other names. But it kind of fizzled out on them during the 1930s. There was a fire out in the swamps out there near Copley and under this track, really terrible. and you could see what was happening. And eventually the company was using the one track partly for storage of cars. They had a plant out there. The Beltline didn't want to risk a regular locomotive on the line as it started to get bad. They were down to their last mogul, number 7, and they didn't want to lose it out there because they knew that they'd never be able to dare send a wrecking crane out and that track out in the swamp. So the Pennsylvania Railroad, the big brother to the Beltline, came up with this solution to that problem. Somewhere they found this 040 Class A engine in storage. Still had the big box headlights on the engine and fender. So they donated it, you might say, to the Beltline. I'm sure it was carried on the books. It's more than a donation, though, knowing Pennsylvania Railroad bookkeeping. And the idea was that they found in the swamps why the track went out from underneath this thing, why they just leave it there, and that's it. Well, maybe they might save the bell. Outside of that, the heck with it. Well, it never happened that way. It successfully got out to the junction and back with cars, although the crews were rather in a position to jump at any minute. But eventually the track itself took care of the problem. It just collapsed entirely, and that ended all track operation that way. This was a serious loss to the AC&Y as a traffic connection. The Beltline, to appease their crews, since that engine didn't have a doghouse in the tender, and besides, who would want to ride a doghouse in the tender under those conditions? So they got some cabooses from the Pennsylvania too. Not having anybody who was a painter or a car letter, you could see that they put a minimum of marking on the caboose. In case you haven't noticed, this is caboose number 1. Well, this rural scene is at Summit Street, top of that deadly grade for Main Street. And of course that's the way it looks now, or reasonably now. In the foreground, back when I was taught watching trains, there were 2 tracks in the foreground here, the Northern Ohio, which went along and curved around out of sight to the right. Over to the left was the main line of the AC&Y, which behind the Canton would go on down to Main Street. And where the switch stand is was the AC&Y's first station. I wish I did have a picture of that. Like I said before, 9-year-old kids didn't carry cameras in those days. They might now, but they didn't back then. But anyway, about where that switch is, why they built a unpainted, open-sided waiting shed. The open side faced the track at the left. And this is where they loaded up the passengers on the McKean cars when they were running their suburban service from Akron out to Goodyear Heights and several other stops out there on out past Britain to Mogador. Well, this was a place that attracted us too. My friend and I, we like to come down here when I think it was the 5:30 run. Here would come all these people walking up from Main Street, and here would be the McKean car there with the prow facing west. They had a knife that would cut anything, I guess. Well, after it loaded up, then came to us the big moment. They'd start up the motor, and it made the most splendiferous racket you ever heard of your life. Ears shattered, you'd swear to hear something like that. It was blowing up. Then, as the car glided away, it would calm down to just a quiet clicking clack. Why it made all that noise to start up, nobody ever explained to me. I never heard another McKean car do it. whether that was a character of this particular car, or they didn't know how to run the motor, I don't know. But anyway, that's the historic site, and maybe the society someday will put a marker there, site of the first AC&Y depot. It was almost as bad as the thing out on Main Street, as far as Chamber of Commerce concerned. Oh, and it had a nice little feature to it. There was a little pocket hanging on the wall, was full of nice little timetables. Put it in your pocket. A little bit bigger than business cards. Of course, we kids all got timetables while you're riding the train. Now, don't ask to see my copy. I don't know what happened. But there's the way it looks nowadays. Back in the so-called good old days, there was a double track going up here. This is looking towards Summit Street. And this is about where we used to watch the train struggle up from the rear of the Bowling School. And along in the bushes here to the right was the Pennsylvania and Ohio Canal. It's gone now, I noticed. At least on a dry day, I didn't see any water flowing there, and I don't know what's happened to the canal, whether they cut it off back at Akron Junction and headed it into the River or what. But it used to flow along here and then go down and down the center of Main Street up to Exchange Street where it joins the Ohio Canal. Probably some of you know what happened to the canal. You do?
It's covered. It's covered in there, but it's open right under the freeway bridge where it dumps into the canal now.
Oh. They must have had a couple of locks before they get canal boats down to Main Street level. But that was long before I got around there. Well, then came the diesel age. As I told you, I was in on the first day with the diesel age. I'll never forget that. The diesel took over the mixed trains. Person was rotated up something like this. They were really a loud yell. I'm not up on diesels, so don't ask me anything about what they are or what they're for. That's the end of the show. Ever heard of any boy or anybody mention? Well, then it truly is forgotten. So I'll bring up a forgotten incident. Bear with me. It's a long story, but you're sitting down, I'm not. My friend Bruce Richardson, the Lakeshore Electric quit 60 years ago. Got a nice brass chime whistle, air chime whistle on the Lakeshore. And then he got a little tank that would fit in the rumble seat of his Plymouth Roadster, and he would get that pressurized over near the gas station and nearly blow it up. And then he liked to go out at night once in a while, driving one of the rural roads, blowing that air whistle until he ran out of air the next day. Well, then somebody pointed out to him that you could drive a car on a railroad track. And let just a little of the air out of the tires while I started this track. And I know at the tire company they said this could be done. Some of the dealers in different places have tested it. I never tried it myself. I just took the word for it. Well, anyway, Bruce tried this out on couple of rusty spurs, and by gosh, it worked. And then naturally, everything gets a bigger plot, you might say. And so then he got looking for a stretch of nice railroad track without all these bumps and everything, and he could drive his roadster on. And he got looking at the different roads. Well, the Beltline had too many crossings. And the three big roads, they were pretty busy, and they had too many crossings. But the AC&Y, between the Fairlawn crossing and Fairlawn, and Fairlawn was then just a little place, nothing like today. It was way out here in the movies. A few daring souls lived in Fairlawn. The next crossing was at Silver Street in Akron. Fairlawn, Silver Street. I think you see what's coming. Well, then he found that there was a deserted field east of that trestle, or that steel bridge over Portage Path, a dirt trail that he could get up to the AC&Y's track. And I might mention, as explanation, none of you probably know Bruce Griffith, maybe some of you remember, but he and his twin brother Dean were noted among the neighbors and friends of the family that they were always up to something. And this was something I always thought. Well, anyway, then he put a pair of marker light brackets on the rear corners of his Plymouth. And when he got to this, he was all equipped. So one day he learned that there was nothing going to be running on the AC&Y after the afternoon mix train got into Akron. Nothing's going west or east. Right? Cary was the nearest place the wheel would be turning. It was going to be a dark night anyhow. So, with the bravery of the triplets, he drove down to this little dirt path, got his Plymouth on the track, headed toward Fairlawn, hung the marker lamps on the brackets and lit them.